Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be looking at a process for doing color and mood iteration, which adds on to the week 2 value sketches that we did. And I'm going to pick 3 different... I've duplicated the same value sketch with all the layers 3 times, and you'll see I've gathered a few references for each mood or time of day that we're going to do, and I'm going to use those images to pick the colors. This first one is a midday, or just daylight, and I'm going to do it at normal speed and then speed up the others. So the first thing to do is I'm just color picking from the photographs as a base because all the colors are there, but I'll definitely tweak it later on because, as we know, photographs don't do the real world justice. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm picking that sky. I always tend to work with the sky first. That dictates the ambience, the color, the lighting, the mood, everything. And I've just color picked the sky and brushed over the sky in color mode of the brush. And the reason I don't always use color mode, but the reason I use color mode for the first go is whenever I want to retain the value of the layer, but just change the color. If I brushed over that in just with a normal brush, then it wouldn't retain the value and I'd have to paint a whole lot more. So I just start with the background in the sky and I go through the layers coming forward into the foreground. I just find it doesn't always have to be this rigid, but you know, it's pretty good to have a process, I guess, and you tend to develop these ways of working when you have to do lots of them at once. So all I'm doing is I've now changed to a normal brush because most of these layers that you'll see are just simple shapes with only a little bit of value transition. So I'm fine just painting directly on the layers. And I'm just going to those 3 reference images. I've picked generally the same time of day, same sort of palette, and I'm just picking from those layers, from those photographs, and, you know, putting down broad colors where I think I see, where I think they need to be. Notice I've kept the saturation for around the main focal point, which is that tower. And the brush I'm using is actually, it's a textural brush which leaves quite a lot of, you know, it's got transparent areas to it, so it leaves quite a lot of what's underneath it to show through. And the reason I'm doing that is to get a little bit of color variation and color vibrance, you know, in the piece without having to do too much. So anytime there's a color underneath and I brush another color on top, some of that color underneath will show through, and that's how we see color. There's millions and millions of colors that we can see in reality. And part of being successful in creating successful colors, especially realistic things, is in creating that color variation and vibrance. So I'm basically, the way I'm approaching each of these layers or each of these objects or whatever it is I'm painting when I'm thinking about color, I'm also thinking about light at this point, because it becomes important. Whereas before it wasn't so important with the value sketches, although it is good to get a sense of lighting. But with these I'm thinking about light and I'm thinking about the local color of the object. So the way I'm doing that is thinking, okay, what's the local color? And the local color means what's the color of the object without any lighting applied to it. And then picking that, and I'm picking that from the reference images, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, when the light in my scene is hitting that object, what color would it be? What would it look like? And I'm looking at the reference for those color keys to pick from, so I don't have to think about it too much, and then I can tweak it later. So there's local color, the light, and then I think about the shadow color. So those are the 3 basic things I'll do on every sort of first pass of every layer, every object in the scene. And so right now I'm just picking texture brush and just with color implying some of those background trees. And notice I'm using the blue in the shadow areas a little bit, because the ambient color of this shadows will often reflect what the sky color is. So that's what I'm doing, that's why that's blue. And while I'm doing this, I'm also, because I'm painting, in this case, mostly with just a flat brush, you know, no color modes, I'm also thinking about value and making sure that I don't lose or adjust the values too much, or maybe adjust the values when they need to be adjusted. So there's no magic trick to translating a grayscale sketch into color. At some point you just have to paint over. But having it set up in layers like this is you know, as you can see, easy. I don't have to think about the silhouettes or anything as long as I'm happy with the value sketch. So you'll notice there that there's a little bit more saturation in that orange, that brown. And whenever I think about light hitting areas, pumping up the saturation a little bit, and the value can help imply. So you just take whatever value is underneath of the object and just pump up the saturation a bit. And here I'm using color as a way of getting focus. So that character, I don't want him to be a huge focal point, but I used a little bit of red, which you'll notice there isn't any in the entire image, so I'm using a bit of that on the shield, and I'll probably dull it down a little bit. Now, one of the other things that you'll see me do, which I'm doing right here on this character, is you see that greeny color that I'm brushing on the bottom. I'm actually thinking about light bounce and light reflection. So, you know, when light hits an object and reflects off it and bounces onto another object, then it creates a color cast depending on what the material of the object the light is bouncing off is. So in this case, I imagined the bottom of that character there is some grass that may be just out of scene that we can't see, and that's creating a bounce of green. And I thought that would work quite well with the reddish shield and with the green that's in the grass as well. So light bounce is actually and light reflection is actually a very good way of getting the added sense of realism. When you see images that are lit just with the light side, the shadow side, and that's it, there's no reflection of light bouncing off surfaces, then those images tend to look unrealistic and quite flat. So that's almost the fourth dimension to light and color, is how, okay, so we know how everything interacts, but now we know how everything works on local, but then how do they interact with each other? So you'll see me do this. So in this case, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm working on those columns. And there's a blue in the shadow, and there's a sort of brown in the lit. You can see me doing that, and then I'm picking, because these are columns, they're made of the same, presumably the same material, I just picked from that light colored highlight on the tower and start brushing things in. And the textural brush makes this sort of rock texture come out very easily without any worries. With other types of environments, it might not be so easy. So I like textural architecture. So yeah, I'm just going through all these layers and making sure that I'm picking the right ones and filling it with a base color with that textural brush. And there you see that green that I just put in that lower of the column, that's light bounce. I imagine the green light hitting that grass and then bouncing up into the columns. So that's the only thing that wasn't separated out in that layer, so I had to make a selection for it. And I'm using counter change here, so to make sure that object still stands out against its background. So all the things that we talked about earlier, I'm actually still considering when I'm doing this color pass. making sure I'm not losing that sense of depth. And there's a little bit of shadowing, like actual direct cast shadowing. And that textural brush is very good at creating a sense of vibration and detail when, you know, I don't really want to paint everything in with, you know, a single round brush. I could get to that later, but definitely not at this stage. Again, this is going to be a broad suggestion of the mood, the lighting, and the color. It's not about detail. Although it looks like there's getting some detail in there, but the brush is doing all the work. So now I've pretty much covered every area of every layer with a general palette, and if you squint your eyes, you'll see that actually the mood is kind of there already. The time of day is pretty clear. So what I'm doing now is going around and refining and adding a little bit more variation. I'm doing value tweaks because like right now I'm darkening up those columns a bit. So I'm doing value tweaks with the color that I've put down, just to make sure that it's still reading the way I want. But now it's just a question of color picking from the image itself, because I've got all the main things down. And you'll notice I'll pull up the color wheel a lot and pick a color from the image, and then decide whether I want to go. But basically, I'm making minor adjustments to that color as I go, depending on what I want to paint. I'll make it a little bit more saturated, or maybe a little bit lighter or darker in value. Maybe I'll change the hue a little bit. I'll make those, and those I can't tell you in detail exactly why in every single instance, but there's a reason that I'm actually moving those sliders. Maybe I want to go a bit more desaturated to push something back a little, or go a bit darker to create deeper shadows. So those, but I'm always doing that from a base color that already exists in the palette, because that way it's not, I'm still maintaining a little bit of cohesiveness, and there are other things that we can do to get all these colors to gel a bit better. But because I'm starting with a few photographs and the references are pretty similar, the colors I already know kind of work. So that's a good thing about starting with photographs. It's not a replacement for understanding light and color and how things interact and doing your own study, but it's a very good way to just get started. So yeah, I don't mind that you guys use photographs in this instance. If you don't want to use photographs, that is totally fine. You know, it may be a bit harder for you to come up with a nice palette, but you know, just definitely go for it. So I'm tweaking values there, making it a bit darker. And that's pretty much all I'm doing at this stage is making sure that the read and the values with the colors that are there are right. And we're only about 12 or 13 minutes in, something like that. And I'm basically painting already. The main color vibe is there. Don't worry about the time. I only mentioned the time because to show you how broadly I'm thinking about the color. I want to get it in relatively quickly and get the general read. Like anything with art, you do the general first, and then you go further and further, more nuanced and more detailed. So there I'm adding a little bit more atmospheric perspective. Getting some of the blues. You'll notice I'll always pick from the sky color when I'm doing atmospheric perspective, because as you'll know by the video, that objects receding into the atmosphere will take on the color of the atmosphere. And there are three main brushes I use. Is this textural brush. There's a big soft round brush, which I'm using now to add a bit of color. So in this case, I wanted to keep that texture, so I changed the mode to color and just brushed in a bit of color on top of it. So that's the only time I really use color modes. The color mode of the layer or the brush is when I want to keep that textural value detail in there, like this. It's more like adding a color cast. It doesn't add a lot of variety to your colors, but you can always add that in a little bit later. Last thing I want to do is, you know, basically redo the value sketch in color. I've done all that hard work. So in this case, I'm using the color dodge. Okay, well, the soft brush earlier that you saw is a color dodge, soft round, and with a relatively saturated warm color. And the reason I did that on there was to get that extra sense of light bounce. The color dodge tool is fantastic for used in very specifically, and you know, with subtlety, is very good at creating that sort of light bounce effect. And you'll see me do this more quite often. So keep an eye out. Top left, you'll see where it says normal right now. That's the brush mode. So keep an eye on that. When it goes to color dodge, you'll see. I'll point it out. Okay, so I think I wanted to get, there we go, color dodge, and it just gives it a nice luminous quality, and I'm only doing a few strokes, quite lightly. Yeah, don't overdo it. And notice I'm also painting quite far out. You know, this is as far zoomed in as you need to be. I'm trying to get the overall read. There you'll see I'm adding a little bit more color to the shadow of that main area. I'm trying to just get a little bit more contrast in there to get more of a sense of that direct cast light. And I'll probably just darken down that whole area pretty soon. There you go. So the thing about color to realize is I'm not thinking about, once I've got the main things in there, I'm not actually thinking about, oh, okay, I've got to pick another blue now. It's more about relative to the color that I'm looking at, what do I need to switch to? And generally, like I mentioned before, it's either value changing or saturation changing or both changing. So it's always a relative, I'm always moving from one color to a relative color to get an effect. I find that helps. There you go, there's a color dodge. I did it on a color dodge layer with a normal brush. And I used a warm color, that yellow, and just to, I'm being very light. Just, you can see how it adds a really nice light glow. But you got to be careful not to go too far, because yeah, you can overdo it very easily. In fact, I probably did overdo it on that area. But again, separate layer, so easy to remove. And you can add little scratch marks of bright value on the color dodge layer just to add that sense of, you know, sharp reflections of light. So there, I think I'm dialing it back a little bit. I actually wanted to do a bit more direct lighting on this, like actual direct sunlight, but I kind of got caught up with the nice sort of light blooms in the, like you can see in front of that character. I really like that soft kind of lighting, so I left it. Okay, so we're about almost 20 minutes in, and I think we're kind of getting close. There we go. So that's what it looks like up close. You'll see it's very, very rough and abstract. But, you know, the color reads, the mood reads, and that's what I want. And I've sped up the video, but here what I'm doing on this is a last final color balance pass. Just to tweak the image a little bit, and it's doing it over the whole image, and I'm adding a little bit of magenta to the shadows. A little bit of more sort of that warmth to the shadow, and a little bit of yellow to the mid-range, and just to, I always check to see that it looks okay. And that final color balance pass actually helps bring together all of the colors, you know, in the image. It shifts them all towards and brings some unity. So that's a good thing to do at this stage. You don't want to go too crazy, but that's one bit of unity you can do. So here's the same idea, except I've got a sort of dusk setting that I want to try. And so brushed in, kept some of that value with a color mode on the brush, and now I'm actually using just a normal brush to pick direct colors off the image. I figured this one I would change the clouds a little bit. So, and I wanted to get very accurate colors to the reference, so I went in pretty quickly with a normal brush. Those bright areas I actually did with color dodge as well. It's very good at creating luminosity and sort of light reflecting and light emitting things. But then with the sort of flattish mountain silhouette, I can just use a soft round brush or gradients, and that works just fine because you know, I'm not too worried about messing up the values. There's not a lot of intricate value work there. I'll probably add a bit of intricate value work as part of the color pass, but yeah, not too concerned. So that's, again, it just shows you when you're trying to do lots of these at once, or be quick and efficient, using layers in a smart way will actually really help speed things up. Can you imagine trying to repaint these all without the layers on top of things you've already, a sketch you've already painted? I mean, it would be nightmarish. A one-off painting is fine, but iterations, mood iterations, heck no. Would not want to do that. So this one has a nice sort of purples in the shadows and blues, and then a little bit more warms and saturateds in the light. And you'll notice I still put a little bit of green down just underneath it, because I might paint over it, but you know, I know the stuff that's there is green. If the local color is green, and there you go, I'm just painting over it, but some of that will show through. So it's basically adapting the local color of what you're painting to the lighting conditions, and that can be quite hard to do. It just requires practice and to know how things get, or just experimentation. You know, see what actually looks right. The more you paint from life, the more you'll start to see and maybe understand how things react in different lighting conditions. So, and of course online there's tons of resources. And if anyone watching this doesn't know already, James Gurney's Color and Light is a fantastic book to describe all the different types of lighting conditions and nuances of color, but still keeping it very non-technical. So there you go. I'm creating, sometimes I just use a big round brush within the layer to brush in some of that sort of bounce and reflective light. Sometimes I'll go above the layer with a brush. It does depend. I find it easier to keep things within the layer locked. It just makes it a bit easier to manage. And I like using as minimal amount of adjustment type layers or color different layer modes on my layers for flat painting, just because it becomes a nightmare when images get really complicated and you're juggling between normal modes and color dodge modes and screen and lighten and all these. It can become a nightmare. Sometimes you need those modes, but when possible, I'll use techniques that use normal layers and maybe just brush modes within those layers. Yeah, I don't like juggling through layers. So here I'm just picking some of that orange stuff in the sky. So I mean, one other thing in these examples, you'll notice that I'm painting directly from the value sketch from scratch each time, because it's relatively quick for me to do that. But another thing you can do is, once you've done one, if you just go through all the layers and you do some color balancing, or maybe you change the hue saturation of it, use those tools that Photoshop or any digital program has to shift the colors a certain way, you can actually get to something else pretty quickly without having to do all this painting. It does depend. If you're going for something specific, it might be easier just to paint directly, but it's a good way to change and quickly iterate just by color balancing, using color tools to change what's already there on one of these. But I thought for the purpose of this demonstration it'd be easier to, or better for you to see it sort of 3 times in action. I don't always work this way, by the way. I'm trying to be particularly organized for these demonstrations, but also for freelance stuff. It really does pay to be more organized, I'm finding. Because I'm a baby in this game, really. I've only been doing it like 5 months? 5 or 6 months, so I literally know nothing. And I'm finding out a whole lot about myself in terms of my own discipline. And bad habits when it comes, that were fine when I was studying, but don't really work when you're freelancing. So yeah, that's something to be very aware of, as workflow becomes very important once you're doing work for other people. Okay, so this one, I think yep, final color balance pass. Just making the shadows a little bit richer. And there's a little bit of integration on this particular one, which I would probably want to do a bit more of. But I'm relatively happy. There you go, that's how it looks like, with the sort of dusk feeling. And notice I'm not directly copying. So this one's going to be a moonlight or nighttime-ish scene. Notice I'm not directly copying the reference. I mean, once I've picked a few colors from them, I actually don't bother looking at them anymore, unless I want to pick something new. And the reason for that is I don't want to duplicate exactly what the photo is. I mean, in this one I've got an actual painting, which is cool. I thought they did really well for sort of moonlight, bright moonlight. But when it comes to pick photographs, I don't want to, you know, be 100% true to those, just because I know they're not as good as if I was standing there myself. So they're starters. It's just a starter. Paintings are probably better to look at when you want realistic lighting, or cooler lighting conditions in general. So I'll always look at not just photographs but also other painters and see what awesome stuff they've come up with that I can totally just steal and claim for myself. I mean, they say the best artists steal religiously, so, or shall I say reappropriate. Okay, so this is, I actually haven't done many Moonlight scenes, and I love them, but they are very hard because there's actually no color to Moonlight. There's an amazing, very informative post by none other than James Gurney again about painting night scenes and the way colors get incredibly desaturated and just, you know, some colors just don't show up at all and everything gets very blurry and indistinct. It's a really interesting article. I'll probably link it below in the comments if I remember to. But yeah, just look up James Gurney painting nighttime or something, painting in moonlight. He has some really great technical explorations and research as well. Very useful. So this one looks a bit like a dog's breakfast at the moment, mostly because I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm just trying out things. And that's one of the things that always, when it comes to painting, is you kind of have to get over is that a lot of the time your image will look like complete and utter crap for a lot of the time until things start coming together. And the trick is to not get discouraged by that, but just to keep, it's one problem after another. You're solving one problem after another, so don't get sidetracked by how things are looking. As long as you keep solving every problem that you see methodically, you'll get to a point where it starts to look good. Well, at least have some faith that it will. It may not. But the more you do it, the more it will. So again, just playing with values, making sure that everything reads as I'm not losing anything by doing the colors. And I'm always picking directly from the layer underneath the cursor. That way I don't have to keep jumping back and forth. Handy tip is, yeah, to pick from whatever's underneath the cursor. That's a good way of making your painting process go a bit quicker. And this is a very freeing process, actually. It's very, very enjoyable because this is where you create the fun stuff that's starting to happen, like the actual mood. And the piece starts to come alive a little bit. The value sketch is fine, but adding the actual mood and atmosphere is really fun for me. Plus, I love color and light, so. And because all the layers are locked, and I was relatively happy with the value, the composition, I don't have to think about it at all. I'm purely thinking about color and light and mood. But I'm thinking about value within the objects and the relationships, but I'm not thinking about their shapes anymore. I might, you know, once this stage is done, then the next would involve a bit more you know, finessing of these shapes and adding sort of set dressing, the little bit details that really make it come alive. See, I'm doing a little bit of shape tweaking there. But yeah, generally, you don't really need it. And you can, with the nice thing with mood iterations is you can actually change textural directions because the lighting direction can change. You know, this one, the moonlight is definitely coming from that top right. Whereas the midday was coming from the behind us to the left. I mean, behind the character. So here I'm using that trick of bounce light again. A bit of blue. Push that leg back, but also indicate that light is bouncing off that platform step and lighting him from underneath. And now with this one, I just wanted to add a little bit more sort of low-lying mist or fog. So you can definitely change up what's there. So this isn't in the initial value sketch, but because we're thinking about mood as well as color, you know, I'm just painting it in, giving it a try. It's probably go a little bit overboard, but part of that is I don't have the right brush set up for fog and mist. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Just playing with the idea of some low-lying mist on the ground. Probably went a little bit overboard. I might dial that down. So yeah, I in general, I'm not sure I really nailed the moonlight. The moonlight setting in this, so I'm going back and attempting to do something about that. But, you know, it's all learning. Just, instead of being scared about it, just grit your teeth and jump right in and give it a go. So that's still a normal brush. And now I'm going to put in, you know, a lovely little moon. A happy little moon. There you go. It's in a separate layer, and now I'm just erasing out of it with a texture brush. Push it back a bit, and then I'm going to go back over it with, I think it's, yep, color dodge. Just a little bit, not too crazy, to make it a luminous object in the sky. And then I'm using that same color dodge layer to add a bit of some really small little highlight hints here and there. Notice the highlight, the little bits of highlight and stuff only go in the bits that I want to grab more focus. I don't bother in the outer edges to do that. Okay, so here's a little bit of a color balance to integrate the whole thing a little bit more. You can go a bit crazy at this stage, but it is always good to do. And then once you've done it, just always check back and see if you like what you've done. That's one tip is, you know, if you're chugging away forward, just make sure that you always check back, see if you're doing better. And in this, I actually did something a bit different because I learned something from Gurney that Moonlight is actually very indistinct because it's so low contrast, even though this image isn't low contrast. So I'm basically going around and smudging edges just to give it a... And I thought I had a brush, a blur brush. I'm sure I do, but this is a move tool, so something happened. But I'm trying to make things a bit more indistinct in general. I think I eventually just give up. So there you go. That's the sort of moonlight scene. Just checking whether I did alright. Yeah, it's okay. I'd want to work a lot more on that, I think. For sure. But that's what it looks like. So there you go. 3 different iterations in color moods. Hope that was useful. Okay, so that brings us to week 3's assignment, which is a little bit late, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Or a lot of hell. No, it'll be a lot of fun. So what I want you guys to do is, just like this, 3 mood and lighting iterations on 1 value sketch. Now you can either pick the value sketch, one of the value sketches that you've done in the previous weeks. Maybe you can pick one from last week that you got some feedback on and you want to improve it, so you can improve your value sketch with the notes I gave you, and then with that sketch I want you to do 3 mood and lighting iterations like the demo. So you know, you can duplicate all your layers into three different ones. Pick some reference for each one. I mean, if you want to go straight color out of your mind, that is totally fine. But if you're not confident, or you know, you have an idea, it's always good to use reference. Don't imagine you'll be able to do it out of your head just because you want to. So yeah, pick a few images. Don't get more than 3 images. And try and keep them relatively, for each mood, each scene you want to do, try and keep them relatively similar, or at least pick a few that you know you're going to use certain aspects from. Yep, set it up. You can set it up like this if you want. I actually definitely want to see your reference images, so maybe your assignment can be submitted like this, and then you can just tell me, well, actually you don't have to tell me anything, let the images speak for themselves. And the deadline for this one is going to be a little bit later. I'm going to give you guys a little bit longer to do it, maybe 9 days or so. So next Saturday, New Zealand time, will be the deadline. I know that color is going to trip up a lot of people. Value and composition and all of that together was bad enough, but now we're talking about adding color and lighting to it. It's gonna frustrate the hell out of a lot of you. So let me just say this up front. Do your best with the time that you have, you know, and try and enjoy it. Think of it as a fun thing to do. And don't worry if you're getting caught up. Don't worry if it looks terrible. Don't worry if you have no idea what you're doing. That's exactly what I'm here for. And you can always ask me questions in the threads, and you know, help each other out. And because I haven't really covered a lot of color theory, I'm going to be talking about specific things through the critique this time, and in the group next live stream. So don't worry about it. Just do your best. I know it's hard, and it's getting harder. Don't try not to agonize too much over it. Just do your best. That's all you can do. And I'll help you guys out once we see what you come up with. All right, cool. So yeah, just get to it. Have fun, guys.